And welcome into the show, y'all. I'm very excited today. I've got Bryan Driskell on here. I'm sure everybody in here is well aware of his comments. He made some pretty inflammatory comments toward LSU and Brian Kelly. He'd covered him for 12 years at Irish Breakdown, and there was clearly a lot to say. We're going to have a ton of comments tonight. Y'all remember, the super chats and the best comments. I'm going to try to find the best comments and put them up there. We both have agreed we want to engage. We've also both agreed tonight. I disagree. I think his comments were trash. I think they were terrible. I don't think he's a terrible person. I don't think he's a bad writer. I'm not doing any personal attacks on Brian tonight, but I am going to come after him after what he said. I'm going to play the clip here for those of us who missed it, and then I'm going to bring the man himself up here. I see him backstage. He's smiling from ear to ear right now. So I'm going to play this, and I'll be right back, y'all.
I'll ask quickly about your outgoing coach, Brian Kelly, the winningest coach in Notre Dame history. He goes to Louisiana State. The last three head coaches for LSU won national titles. Will Brian Kelly win a national championship at LSU?
No, he won't. He won't recruit the way he needs to recruit. I don't think he's the coach he was at Grand Valley, the coach he was at Cincinnati. I think that guy is gone. I think he is Notre Dame wasn't lacking talent. Notre Dame lacked big game production because Brian Kelly just didn't get those teams ready to play in big games. And I don't think that all of a sudden miraculously changes because he's now in Baton Rouge. I think Notre Dame fit more of his personality. It fit his recruiting base. The most southern place he'd ever coached before Notre Dame was Cincinnati. Notre Dame's the second most southern place he's ever coached. So I don't see the fit, to be honest with you. And, say that's sour grapes or the case may be. But honestly, guys, I was ready for Brian Kelly to be done 2020 because I feel he had taken the program as far as he could, and I don't see him cleaning up that dumpster fire at LSU anytime soon.
Whew. Yeah, Brian, I'm going to
Muted myself. Yeah, there it is, y'all. I needless to say, I disagree. I've spoken to y'all a lot about what I think about the unfair advantage LSU has as a program. I disagree. I told y'all I'm not taking personal shots. I see in the comments where y'all aren't adhering to that, but that's okay. That's what y'all are here for. Y'all take shots at me too. It's all good. He brought plenty of his Irish breakdown. So with no further ado, here he is, Brian. Brian, I'm going to jump directly in this. He said Kelly can't win a championship at LSU, or he won't win a championship at LSU.
Sure.
Ed Orgeron and Les Miles are the last two coaches to do that and have done it in the last 20 years. Are you saying that Brian Kelly's not as good as coach as Les Miles and Ed Orgeron?
Well, I'm saying Brian Kelly's not a fit at LSU. The reality is not every coach is going to have the same level of success at every place that he has been, right? You look at a guy, let's take some examples in the last couple that we talk about at Irish Breakdown. Tom O'Brien does a great job at Boston College, right? Northeastern guy, goes to NC State, can't recruit down there, can't coach down there, can't connect people down there, does a terrible job. You look at a guy like Randy Edsall, did a great job at UConn, goes to Maryland, bad fit, does a bad job. My only thing about Brian Kelly is I don't think Brian Kelly's a good fit. I think that LSU caught lightning in a bottle in 2019. By the way, I predicted LSU to make the college football playoff that year, by the way. So for all the people think I'm an LSU hater, I'm not an LSU hater.
I think it might be a little too late to pick up some LSU fans here.
I don't really care about what LSU fans think about me. That's not my audience, but at least know who I am and what I'm talking about. This isn't an anti-LSU comment. The comments you said was I'm inflammatory, right? So my thing would be, what is an inflammatory about that? And it's not so much that Brian Kelly's a bad coach, but can Brian Kelly win there? Let
me jump in and tell you why I don't like that take.
Okay. About which one, by the way? The fit?
The fit. No. It's fair. It's fair to go one by one here because we're going to go all over the place. So the take, man, of the culture fit.
Sure.
9 of LSU's last 8 championships across all sports have been guys who weren't from Louisiana. Ed Orgeron was the first guy from
Has nothing
Louisiana.
to do with him not being from Louisiana, though.
Well, and look,
just I just want you to understand one thing, Preston. Understand one thing. This is not a statement saying that a northern person can't win in the South or a southern person can't win in the North. It is about the specific individual and how well they fit down there.
I'm going to tell you this. In the SEC, I know the South's a different culture, but ultimately with SEC, specifically with fans, it's a winning culture.
Sure.
If you win football games, you will fit in fine. Les Miles was the most quirky, awkward, goofy guy I've ever seen. I did his press conferences. He told me the weirdest stories I've ever heard that no Southerner would sit and bear. But because he was winning games during the time, fans loved him. We embrace winners.
It's not about
Nick
that,
Saban
though.
has no cultural fit. And my question is there any evidence that shows, geographical ties or personality?
It's not about
fit?
geographical ties. It's about Bryan Kelly. It's about the type of person he is.
Bryan Kelly makes him not a fit?
He's not going to be able to recruit down there. The way that Bryan Kelly treats people, the attitude that he has, he's a Northeastern former politician, liberal
how
politician.
Can you say he can't recruit? He's got the 6th-ranked recruiting class right now. LSU usually averages around 7.
Okay, first of all,
8 or 9 spots.
August, man. It's August. Okay, number one. Number two, he's not out there on the road getting all these kids, right? I mean, is Bryan Kelly the guy that's gotten a verbal commitment? Is he the one that's recruiting all each one of these kind of kids?
A number of people.
So the reality is Notre Dame has had higher ranked classes in August than the number 6, right? It's going to be about where they finish at the end, right? So you asked me a question. Let me answer it. Okay. I've followed Bryan Kelly for 12 years. Okay. You guys have a problem with the comments I made about LSU. And a lot of the responses were, well, you don't know LSU. You don't know the South, all this other kind of stuff, right? Well, I've lived in the South and I don't know LSU the way that you do, but you'd have to then give me the same benefit out that I have covered this guy for a decade. I know him. I know how he treats people. I know how he interacts with people. I know how he is with boosters. I know how he's with high school coaches. I know how he treats his players. I know how his locker rooms were. I know about the things that were going on at Notre Dame. And you know this as well as I do, Preston, because we talked about this when you had me on your show back in, what was it, December?
November, right? Yeah.
I was not a Bryan Kelly supporter.
No, you weren't.
At the time, before Bryan Kelly left. So this whole thing about, oh, you're
just
that
mad would have been on the heels of him leaving, but
right.
I believe you. But I believe you weren't
knew
on
my stances about Bryan Kelly before then, which was, I think, part of the reason that you brought me on, because I was going to give an objective view of who Bryan Kelly was.
Yeah.
And there are good things to say about Bryan Kelly. He didn't accidentally win over 100 games, right? It's about, can you win a championship at a place like LSU? And I think that the every school presents unique challenges, right? Say, well, LSU has a lot, Louisiana has a lot of talent, and say, all right, cool, right. You're going to always have somewhat of a highly ranked class when you're there. Ed Orgeron could recruit. Les Miles could recruit. We'll see if Bryan Kelly can recruit.
But here's the thing, though.
Hold on, let me finish what I'm saying, though. Okay.
Yes. All right.
There's
some points.
You've got to get to signing day first. You can't talk to me about, and this is the counter argument that people make to me when I talk about how well Marcus Freeman is doing. Well, let's see if you can hold on to those recruits. Let's see if you can keep on this guy. Hey, let's see if you can keep Ryan Yates from flipping to A&M or whoever else, right? Like, none of us really know what our coaches are going to do until we actually get to signing day. Right. True. But I know Bryan Kelly. I know he may be hitting the ground running because he's got something to prove right now. But I know Bryan Kelly. We have seen this before. He did this for the first, I say, 6 to 8 months after the 2016 season. Started doing things that got him in trouble to lead up to the 4-8 2016 campaign. He changed those things for 6, 8 months, and then all of a sudden went back to being the Bryan Kelly that he'd always been, the guy that cared more about going on vacations and the guy that cared more about going golfing and doing his other things, and he cared about recruiting. So if he's going to be successful recruiting there, I'll leave this open. This is a possibility. If he changes who he was the last 12 years in Notre Dame, then sure, he might be able to win at LSU because he'll be able to recruit. But that's not the Bryan Kelly we saw the last 12 years.
Well, I'm going to tell you this, Brian. I've covered him for 6 months now. I'll give that perspective. I believe that's 1 out of 20 what you got. But what I saw during that 6 months, he inherited a roster that needed, and there was 39 scholarship players playing for that game. Okay. And then you had a recruit with 12 commits. Granted, you had your quarterback and you had some good 5-star players in there. He went out and got Harold Perkins, who I think is the best player in the country.
He went out and got Harold Perkins, because I could find a quote where he said he hasn't really talked to Bryan Kelly.
Well, that was when he first got there, but you don't think you think he signed the dotted line without talking to the head football coach?
As far as being, I have done this. I've had the same argument with Preston. I've had the same argument with Notre Dame fans for the last decade. Because you know who hated me before LSU fans? Notre Dame fans who didn't like the fact that I was hard on Bryan Kelly. And it would be the same thing. Like, well, he just finished with this class that ranked such and such and such and such. And I say, look, I talked to 3 top 100 recruits in last year's class that said they barely talked to Bryan Kelly. Well, how'd they
I'm gonna
get
tell
these
you,
kids? Because, well,
the fact of the matter
you
is,
just let me finish. I mean, look, Preston, I appreciate you having me on, but just let me finish a point and then you can counterpoint. Okay. I have had these conversations. Notre Dame sells itself in certain regards. I believe LSU sells itself in certain regards. So just because certain kids come doesn't mean they came because of the head football coach. That's my point.
okay, so I'm a counterpoint here. I saw a class that needed 20 players in a month. And that's what he went and did. And he brought in some really good transportal guys. We're talking about guys for all conference type players. Guy LSU wasn't in on before he got there.
Mm-hmm.
And he brought in, a ton of, Harold Perkins was a guy LSU wasn't getting at the time until he got here. And even, as elite of a recruiter as Ed Ogeron was, he wasn't getting him. And I don't buy that he just came here without having talked to.
I just said that's what he had said, and I'm telling you, he didn't come there because there's no evidence. I haven't read anything that said he came there because of Bryan Kelly. I mean, is that a different argument?
I think all 20 came because they had faith in the head coach and what was going on. I think it was a very look. That was a tight period, man. You got a month to bring in 20 guys. And then, the subsequent months after signing day, you're trying to scrape up whatever you can. And they put it together. And this looks like a roster that's ready to compete, which is saying a lot. It's just saying a lot. So I'm going to move on here. I think we're just going to disagree
part's
there.
Subjective, right? Like we could both make arguments whether they will or won't be good this year. I mean, we'll find all that out. Like same with Notre Dame. I may say, I think Marcus Freeman's going to be good, but we got to find it, right? So
I think LSU's going 8-4.
Okay.
I don't think it's about this year. I think
so when you say compete, you're talking more long term, setting it up for
long term.
Okay,
long term. It's not about this year. It's not. It's about.
Okay.
Let me tell you my perspective here. I've watched LSU for 20 years have really bad coaching. Abysmal coaching, and both of them won championships and won big games outside of that. Went to another championship, won the SEC, 10+ games, multiple seasons. Tons of top 5 rankings. I've seen a lot, man. And through it all, there was utter dysfunction, chaos, so much wasted talent.
So
I think about
kind of a dumpster fire, you're saying?
All right. Well, we'll move on to that. Dumpster fire. All right. There's one.
Tell me how I'm wrong.
I'm gonna. There's one sense I might agree with you, and I already told people this. I'm gonna ask you, what do you mean it's a dumpster fire, and then we'll go from there because you could be taking it a bunch of different ways.
Sure. So what I said was, I don't think he's going to fix the dumpster fire. I never said he created the dumpster fire. I never said Bryan Kelly arriving is why all these bad things are happening. What I'm saying is what I saw of Bryan Kelly. What's the problem?
No, I'm just saying, like, you can't bring in the winningest football coach in college football and say that's bringing the dumpster. He's got the most wins.
No, I said I didn't say that. No, I didn't say that. What I said is I didn't say
that's why, no doubt,
the show that he didn't say that. Correct.
What is the dumpster fire?
Well, let me ask you this question. Hypothetically, let's say over the next 2 years, Georgia just won the national championship. Let's say tomorrow that the NCAA announced that they were going to lose scholarships because A.J. Green was handing out cash after the national championship game. And then let's say there was just multiple sexual allegations, right, against people. You have transfers. Your locker room is dysfunctional because of all types of things, which happened in, let's say 2020. You fire coach right before the season. He then sues the school, wins $500,000. Your head coach leaves his wife right after the national championship. There's all these issues, players reporting these other type of people around. You have a Title IX lawsuit. 5-star Brock Bowers transfers out of the program after 1 year, and not even a 1 year.
Brock Bowers was
and then, huh?
No,
I said I'm talking about Georgia.
Okay.
If this happened right after Georgia's championship, right? Then you go out, you go 11-12 in the 2 years after the next 2 years. Georgia goes 11-12. They fire Kirby. They get turned down by Jimbo, get turned down by Lincoln Riley, Billy Napier, Mel Tucker, and then hire a coach that for the last decade, your fan base, the Georgia fan base, had been saying is overrated in a garbage program. You're telling me you wouldn't consider that a dumpster fire if that was happening to another program?
It depends. Are we talking about
one that have gone over the last 2 years?
Won 3 national championships since the BCS launched because,
what does that have to do with what Bryan Kelly inherited? Bryan Kelly's not inheriting Les Miles's program or Nick Saban's program. He's inheriting this program. Are you going to tell me that
he is inheriting a brand where recruits have seen this program win a championship?
Sure.
And multiple, probably.
Sure.
And that's a big deal.
You're trying to make this
so in terms
about
of
the
the
LSU
Chargers, let's just get
tradition.
up there.
Hold on a
All the
second. You're trying
Chargers
to
have been
make this. You're missing the point. There's a lot of these things that happen, right? But what I'm saying is it was one thing after another, that if this was happening to another fan base, darn well LSU fans would be saying the same thing about that program that I said about
Well,
LSU.
let me get this out.
But let me just make sure,
Well,
because you
hold up
said
now,
something, I
hold
want to
up. No,
respond.
you keep on asking me not to interrupt you. Let me
No,
finish my
but
point here.
I'm going to come back to what you said before about the 3 championships and over 19 years and all that kind of stuff. None of that has to do with the program that Brian Kelly inherited and what he has to fix. Why did you hire Brian Kelly?
To do? How can you say that?
What? No.
How can you say it doesn't have anything to do?
Because it doesn't have because Matt Flynn's not walking through the door. Leonard Fournette's not walking through the door. My point is the program is what it is, right?
But the Heisman Trophy is right there in football.
But did Brian Kelly walk into a situation where there is a Heisman Trophy winner on this team?
No, but he can pick up the phone and call one to help recruit.
He's got to fix that.
He's a 5-star receiver.
But what did I say?
Up the road.
What did I say though, Preston?
Instead of across the country.
What did I say? He's not going to fix the dumpster fire, right? So the picking up the phone to call some kid, right? Like I'm a big Ricky Collins fan. Notre Dame fans will tell you that for a year. I said he's one of the most underrated quarterbacks in the country, right? I love Ricky Collins. He's a top 100 caliber kid to me, and he's raw. So what I love about him is there's a lot of room for him to get better, right? And I'm a big Mike Denbrock fan, and I think he's going to do well with Coach Denbrock. So my point is, but that is about going out and finding a quarterback to fix the quarterback room if there's a perceived quarterback room problem once Jaden Daniels and certain guys leave over the next couple of years. So what I'm saying is, what is the situation that Brian Kelly walked into? You're telling me he walked into a perfectly fine, normal, regular situation that he's got to just keep doing what you're doing? Or does he have to fix something?
Let me tell you in what sense I believe it's a dumpster fire. The roster he inherited was. He inherited a rough roster. Ed Orgeron left the roster in a rough position. And one that I think he deserves more than 1 year to correct, right?
Agreed.
But he also inherited a team that's bringing in a 5-star quarterback. He also inherited a program that has one of the 3 most unfair recruiting advantages in the country. He has a program that's won 3 championships since the BCS launched. There's only 2 programs that can claim that. He inherited, resources out the wazoo, one of the biggest stadiums in the country. All that's still there.
Very rabid fan base.
Here's the deal. Within 3 years, every single player on this program is getting replaced anyways. So he's going to have to do that one way or another. So give him those 3 years, right? And
that
it doesn't matter
what
roster he's inheriting. He's going to have replaced it and put his own teams in there. So I think to call the program a dumpster fire is just foolish.
It is though. You even said that part of it is, right? Brian, why did Ed Orgeron get fired?
Well, because he was a disorganized coach who couldn't keep his shit together, and
there you go.
Just
Brian Kelly's
management was terrible.
What was the reason that you hired Brian Kelly as a program? It's to fix that, correct?
Correct. You hired the winning.
Okay, so that's all I'm saying. It's a mess. LSU is a mess. If the word dumpster fire offends you, cool. All right, I won't say dumpster fire. It's a freaking hot mess.
In the one sense, I'll agree with you. I'll give you that credit.
Right.
One sense,
and Brian Kelly was hired to fix it.
But in every other way, the program is just fine.
But see, that's a different. Again, that's not what I was referring to. He has a mess of a situation that he has to fix. Correct.
All right. So what was the situation he inherited at Notre Dame? Then that's what I want to know.
Oh, it was similar. It was similar. It wasn't as much of the off-field stuff. He was hired mostly because Charlie Weiss couldn't win.
Well, I look at it a guy who 3 seasons of 4-8, 6-6, 7-6. Is that right?
3-9, 7-6, 6-6.
Brady Quinn, right?
Yeah.
Right.
3-9, 7-6, 6-6. They didn't go to the bowl game last year.
The long-term history, but even at that point, I believe it was 22 years when he got there since Notre Dame had won a championship.
Sure.
If I'm wrong on that
is
number,
not relevant to the roster he inherits and the situation, the circumstance he's walking into.
Right.
Brian Kelly at Notre Dame inherited a pretty talented roster. I mean, if you go look at the players that were part of that 2012 BCS title run to the title game, a lot of those guys were guys that Brian Kelly inherited, right? It was Manti Te'o, it was Cameron Lewis Morris, Tyler Eifert, Zach Martin, Chris Watt, Braxton Cave. I mean, there were some guys they recruited. Everett Golson was a Brian Kelly recruit. Stephon Tuitt was a Brian Kelly recruit. but a lot of Kavari Russell started as a freshman, was Brian Kelly recruit. He inherited a roster that had some holes. Charlie Weiss wasn't a good coach. He showed that at Kansas. He showed that at Florida as an offensive coordinator. Let me finish. What he had to fix at Notre Dame was you had a bad roster and you had a coach that wasn't a good coach. Charlie Weiss inherited a situation where Ty Willingham was good at teaching fundamentals. He wasn't a great recruiter. He was actually a bad recruiter. And just the game day preparation. Charlie walks in with a ready-made team, wins in 2 years with a veteran team, and then when all those veterans are gone, they sank because he was a guy that could call plays but not build a team. But one thing Charlie could do was recruit. And he recruited they had the number 2 class in 2007. The 2009 class brought in Manti Te'o, Zach Martin, and Tyler Eifert. I mean, that's
okay. Well, look. Well, I'm gonna end this short here.
Real quick. Have all the other stuff going on that he had to fix.
They inherited a roster that was in a similar position. Okay, and
no, not similar position. Not a similar position.
And in his last 7 years, he's won 10 games, 6 out of the last 7 times.
Sure.
And I don't think Notre Dame's a program that's quite as easy to build up. I don't. I think the recruiting is a little harder. You got to go national.
Different.
I mean, LSU, he just picked up a 5-star receiver 5 minutes off campus. He picked up a 4-star quarterback 20 minutes off campus. You want your highly recruited left tackle?
Hey, and Notre Dame picked up a top 100 linebacker from 2 minutes off of his campus.
Okay, but he's going to pull more in-state talent this year than he probably pulled his entire tenure.
Well, we'll see about that. I mean, they went to Ricky Collins because you missed on the first 2 quarterbacks you went after from the state.
That's right. And the first guy in state he went to, they got. And they didn't have to go far.
Third guy in state that they got.
No, absolutely not. Because I went to 7-on-7 before Dante Noor made his decision. And you know who Brian Kelly went to go see? It wasn't Arch Manning. Brian Polian popped in for 5 minutes. Okay. It was the whole staff was around Ricky Collins. That's the guy
you're telling me they chose Ricky Collins over Arch Manning?
I'm telling you exactly what.
No, I'm asking. I'm not arguing with you. I'm asking you a question.
Yes,
you're telling me that they chose Ricky Collins over.
That's what the evidence suggests.
So what you're saying is they didn't recruit. Hold on, Preston. I'm asking a question. I'm not arguing with you. I'm asking.
Okay, but I'm giving you the answer.
So
the answer is
I'm not
they
done.
all went
they
to
passed on
Ricky
Arch
Collins and not Arch Manning. They were 100 yards
So
away.
after they lost Eli, then they went to Ricky. So no Arch, Eli, Ricky. Is that what you're saying?
I don't know if they even went after Eli. Eli was committed long before they got there.
Okay.
He was committed to Texas A&M, and he flipped to Bama.
Okay.
I don't think Eli was ever in the picture.
They think
they want Eli Holstein.
Again, another question. I'm not arguing. I'm trying to ask a question. Are you saying that they think that Ricky Collins is better than Arch Manning, or you just didn't think they were going to be?
It's my understanding that Ricky is their number 1 guy in state.
Okay, so they think he's better than Arch Manning. Okay, good to know.
That's my understanding.
That'll be interesting to see. We'll see how that plays
out. Because Arch Manning was uncommitted.
Okay.
And he was standing right over there, man.
Okay.
And not one of them went to go talk to him. Okay. Brian Polian popped in, and
I just want to make sure we're on the same page because there's certain kids Notre Dame hasn't gone after because they know they're not going to get.
By the
way,
watch all 3 quarterback play.
Okay.
And I think Eli might be a little bit better than Ricky Collins, but Ricky Collins got better legs. And he's a better leader.
Okay.
I'll take Ricky Collins, in my opinion.
Okay.
Now, I think they're both.
You can agree to disagree on that one. That's fine. That's fair. If you say that
I've
picked
seen them both
Ricky
play.
over,
and anybody I've talked to who's seen them both play,
okay,
they all kind of agree.
That's
with
fine.
Me that, yeah,
I'm not arguing with you on that. I'm just on the record. We're saying that you think
Arch is not a bad kid, by the way.
I'm not saying you're
he
saying
didn't
that.
ask to be the number 1 overall player.
I'm just simply saying that your claim is that they thought Ricky Collins better than Eli Manning. Okay, it is what it is. We can go on to the next topic. But again, the problem I think you have with what I'm saying is you're still trying to make it about whether or not LSU is a program that can or can't win. I've never said they can't. I've made the case for LSU in arguments we've discussed because we talk about other things. What I'm saying is each coach walks into a unique situation, correct? That they have to rectify.
Let me tell you what I'm actually saying. What I'm saying is LSU is a program where bad coaches can win championships.
Okay.
And we've seen it for 20 years. And ever since Nick Saban reinforced that wall around the
Miles was a bad coach.
Let me talk now.
Let's make sure we're on the same page.
So,
Les Miles is a bad coach.
Nick Saban built that fence around the state, and now all of a sudden those players stop going to Miami. They stop going to Florida State. They come to LSU. They grow up wanting to go to LSU. It's a whole generation now. Okay.
Never disagreed.
All those dudes want to come to LSU, and that's an unfair advantage, man.
Sure.
A very unfair advantage. And I think that's why bad coaches are winning championships and then getting fired. What's a good coach going to do? Who just has the structure and organization and consistency and preparation and can call a football game if he needs to. He's not one bad coordinator hire away from 6-6. He knows how to call.
He is. I mean, he literally did that at Notre Dame. A bad coordinator led to a 4-8 season a year after they went to the Fiesta Bowl. Like, he literally did that.
You don't think it was all those players and talent he lost from that? It was just a bad coordinator.
To go from 10-3 to 4-8. That dude, they lost to a 3-9 Michigan State team, a 4-8 Duke team at home. They lost to Navy. Are you telling me Notre Dame didn't have better teams than that? There was almost a mutiny on the sideline against Duke in 2016 because he would not, because they hated Brian Van Gorder, a guy that the players wanted fired after 2014.
Well, but didn't he follow that up with what, 5 straight 10-win seasons?
Sure. With a coaching staff that he didn't hire. He was trying to leave after 2016. Matter of fact, one of the jobs he tried to get was the LSU job, but obviously LSU wasn't going to take him, and that's fine. I mean, you can't hire a coach coming off 4-8. I don't care like how good he has been their years before. I mean, we all agree on that.
But since then, he's been winning just about as good as anybody in the country.
Well, he's been no. I mean, look, here's the stats.
I mean,
here's the stats.
You can't name 5 guys who's won more since then.
Sure. Well, I can name more than 5 guys that have been better than 10-10 against top 25 teams.
Well, I look at that. I'm glad you brought that up because that's the big knock on him. We can both agree that's the big knock on him is against the big time competition. I watched almost all of his games, right?
Sure.
And every
You've
time
watched
I watch
almost all his games. Okay,
I
like that.
I see almost all the big games. I'm not watching Notre Dame play Navy, but you get what I'm saying.
Some Notre Dame fans don't watch Notre Dame play Navy, dude.
I have nothing against Notre Dame, man. But I do enjoy watching those big time games with them. And what always stands out is every time I watch those big games, I don't see a team that's ill prepared and not playing. I see a team that's gassed, dude. I see Clemson running all up and down the field. I see that so that 2011-2012 championship, one year was LSU, next year was Notre Dame.
Sure.
They both got trounced. Sure. LSU went to that game and got mopped coaching wise. Sure. Those players ran up and down the field. They could hold their own. They did their own. Notre Dame, that wasn't the case, man.
That's not part of the thing I'm talking about. Though.
It was a team that could not keep up. They did not have the Jimmies and Joes.
And did you watch the Manti thing? Did you watch the Manti documentary?
Yeah, I watched the Manti thing.
I mean, so that stuff was breaking in the locker room before that game too, which made it even worse. I mean, that you did not see the best version of Manti Te'o in that game.
I don't think that's that much of a difference. I think.
Well, my point is that when you're already facing a team that's better than you, and then that happens, my point is I'm not blaming Brian Kelly for 42-14 in 2012. I'm not.
I mean, Manti Te'o could have been dating a Sports Illustrated supermodel, and that team's still getting trounced. I mean,
okay, I think you're not hearing what I'm saying. I'm saying I don't blame Brian Kelly for that. That's okay. That's not what. Not only did Bama have a better roster, you're dealing with all this stuff going on. You're not going to have a chance in that game. Is my point. I'm not banging.
I don't think it's
the 10-10 I'm referring to is the last 5 years. Right, last 5 years. I mean, there's been 2 years in Brian Kelly's last 5 years, 2 seasons, where your only win over a ranked opponent was Navy. Right, and another year this year where you did not beat a single ranked team, not one single ranked team that finished in the top 25. Right, this is one of the things I've been complaining about when he was at Notre Dame, and you could say, okay, Notre Dame didn't belong on the field against Clemson and Alabama. And I think every time they played those teams had better rosters, right? Now, I think there's been some things that Brian Kelly could have done to make some games more competitive, but that's a different conversation. But what's the explanation for losing 41-8 to Miami? What's the excuse for going on the road and blowing a
speed state and they had more dudes? I think
Miami did not have more dudes in 2018. You're talking about the 2017 game? You're telling me Miami had better players than Notre Dame?
Yeah, more speed on that team. I look at the Notre Dame teams in almost all these big games. It's always the same theme, man. It's tough to get those speed athletes out to the Midwest. And
Notre Dame had one of the fastest teams in the country in 2015.
Documentary, you know what stood out to me is he said he got to Notre Dame. He thought it was a religious obligation, right? And he said, I didn't even want to be here my first year. It's cold. It's out in the Midwest. It's and I think a lot of players deal with that. A lot of players that come from a lot of these states that produce a ton of speed don't want to go out to the Midwest. I think that's a big.
Then why is Ohio State always so athletic?
Was what?
Why is Ohio State always so athletic?
Ohio has a really strong recruiting base. Indiana
Of the
not.
elite athletes that Ohio State had this past year, how many are from Ohio?
You know, man,
Where's
look,
CJ Stroud from? California.
are
Where's
you think Notre Dame's brand is
Virginia.
really up there with Ohio
Jackson's,
State though?
But you didn't say brand. You said they don't want to
But they
deal
have
with the
in-state
cold.
and brand on Notre Dame.
You just said they don't want to deal with the cold.
That's a factor. Okay,
so it's not. So
the fact is Notre
not a
Dame has to
factor
go
because
far
they
away
have
to get
no
these
problem
guys.
going to Ohio. Where was Ohio State's two best receivers?
Look, man, I don't know how many.
Texas.
I haven't gone through and done all the research, but a lot of them.
But
a lot of good players are in Ohio.
See, I hear
Ohio
this all the time, Preston. I hear this all the time. You can't. You can't go and you don't want to go in the north and play in the cold, but then all these southern kids go up to Ohio State and play in the cold, right? So clearly that's not it. What it is Ohio State has been a better
I think
program.
what it is Notre Dame doesn't have the same appeal as an Ohio State.
Right.
And
Whose fault is that?
Ohio has much more in-state talent.
Whose fault is that?
Not,
but see, again, you said speed. Okay.
Speed.
Who are the speed guys from Ohio that they've had in recent years?
I mean, have you gone down and counted the list of who's from Ohio?
I have this conversation all the time. Yeah, I've had this conversation. Do I have the numbers in front of me? But I know the answer.
Well, I'll tell you who they are.
Where's Ezekiel Elliott from?
I'll tell you who they are.
Right?
You're not going to have this problem.
Really dynamic guy they had from Ohio was Devin Smith back in 2014.
So all due respect to guys like Golden Tate,
sure,
Malcolm Floyd, good players.
Michael Floyd.
Very good players, deserving of a first-round draft pick. All due respect, they ain't Jamar Chase. They ain't Justin Jefferson.
Who else is?
They ain't Odell Beckham. These guys grow on trees in Louisiana.
Who else is Jamar Chase?
What's that?
Who else is Jamar? Who else is as good as Jamar Chase?
Well, I'll just name Justin Jefferson. They were on the same team together.
Right.
That was the same year.
Right. They're very talented players.
Recruiting class in Louisiana, you had Devontae Smith.
But you keep having this argument about I'm anti-LSU. Remember, picked LSU to go to the playoff because of those guys.
It's not that you're
anti-LSU thing. I think Brian Kelly is not a good fit there. I think he is a guy that is wasted talent. Go back and look at the 2015 team that Notre Dame had. Their slowest guy ran a 4.48 at the combine. They had the most explosive receiver in college football.
All due respect to a 4.48,
it's
not the kind of freak show LSU.
I said that was their slowest guy.
Okay, who was their fastest?
They had the most Will Fuller, who ran a 4.32 at the combine, was the most
due respect to Will Fuller
that year.
I named 10 receivers from Louisiana probably better than Will Fuller. All due respect to him. You don't understand.
Hold on. I just want to hear you broke up a little bit. Preston, you broke up a little bit. I didn't hear what you said.
All right, so here's the thing. All due respect to Will Fuller. We can both agree he's a very good player, right? In 1 year, in one recruiting class at Louisiana, okay, you had Devontae Smith, you had Justin Jefferson, and you had Jamar Chase.
Okay, that's 3. You just said 10.
Well, look, man, Odell Beckham and Jarvis Landry, okay?
How many of those guys ran faster 40 times than Will Fuller? Because you said it's about speed, right?
It's about
those guys ran better than 4.32.
Speed and quality of player. Trenton Holiday ran a 4.28, but if you can't catch the ball, it doesn't mean nothing. You got to have it all. Okay, but the speed is a major factor in finding a lot of these super fast receivers. Are you saying Notre Dame hasn't gotten gusted in these major matchups speed-wise?
Sure they have. We talked about that on our show today.
Then there we go. What are we debating?
You gonna let me finish? In 2020, their 2 fastest players were not playing in that game. Right? Kevin Austin ran a 4.43 at the combine. Braden Lindsey's a track champ. He's going to be a low 4.4, high 4.3 guy. The point is, you said they don't have speed. In some games, that's been an issue. In other games, it has not. The 2015 team was one of the most explosive teams in the country that year. It's just a fact.
Let me ask you straight up.
It's a fact.
Do you think that LSU is not an easier place?
I've never said it wasn't
for a championship than Notre Dame.
I've never said it wasn't. I don't think Brian.
Are you saying LSU is actually an easier place to win a national championship than Notre Dame?
Oh, absolutely. I've made this case before. I don't think Brian Kelly can win there, though. That's 2 separate arguments. I think LSU is a great job in a lot of ways.
So I'm glad we connected on that last point, but here's.
But I've never said the opposite of that.
I just don't understand how you think Ed Ogeron and Les Miles can
because they can recruit.
But he's recruiting quite well right now.
We'll see. I mean, they're 6th,
we're literally constructing points.
What was their last 2 classes?
Why it's so easy
to recruit? What was the last 2 classes
LSU?
ranked before Brian Kelly got there? Where'd they rank?
Let's see here. Well, they had the 3rd ranked transfer portal class in the country right now, right? And they
2 years before Brian Kelly got there, they ranked 4th and 4th when it came to high school recruiting. So it's going to be easier to recruit there from a ranking
It
standpoint.
absolutely is. But
Can he
it doesn't
build a
matter.
roster that's going to win? See, again, here's the whole thing. That is my opinion after covering him for 12 years. You're trying to argue that LSU is capable of winning a championship. I don't disagree with that. I don't
But
disagree
you're
with that at
arguing,
all. I don't
but
think Brian
no matter
Kelly
who
is
the
capable
coaches
of
at
pushing those
LSU,
buttons.
they're always in top 5.
Well, I mean, that's fine. You can think that, okay? But
They're
I'm
always.
just telling
I
you
mean,
that
it's always there.
a
It
guy that
doesn't
I've
matter.
covered for 12 years is someone who I don't think can win there. You
I-
then
I-
want to
it-
tell me how
it-
LSU has all these
Les
built-in
Miles
advantages.
and
I
Ed
don't
Ogeron
disagree with that.
both recruited at elite levels because the formula is simple. You're going to get 12 guys in state
We'll see.
who are blue chippers.
We'll see.
Get 12 of your
We'll
top
see.
15 and then pluck
No, you
the
said
rest
that
of your class
they're
out
going
of
to get
state.
12 of their top 15 from in-state. They're not going to get 12 of the top 15.
That's
from
very
in-state this year.
common, though.
No,
That's
no,
very not this
in the
year
past,
because it's his
sure.
first year. It's his
Sure.
first year.
Okay, but you're
So
assuming.
you're supposed to come in and
Hold on. So I just want to understand what you're saying. You're assuming that once he gets rolling, that he is going to recruit like that. Is that what you're saying?
yeah, the assumption would be yes, unless
Okay.
he's recruiting so well out of
And that's
state.
fair.
that
And you're
they don't
basing
have
that off
spot.
of what? You're basing it off because that's what you've seen, correct?
Yes, LSU
Okay.
consistently pulls in 12
Sure.
of the top 15.
My stance on why I don't think Coach Kelly is going to recruit that way is because of what I have seen for the last 12 years. That's a fact. What was Ed Orgeron's reputation? What got him to where he has been?
Where
He
it's
was
just
a great
completely
recruiter.
different. It's a lot harder.
It's not about the results. It's about what goes into the results. And you have to be able to look at both things, right? Like I've
don't
covered
you
this
think
team.
that putting together 20 players in 3 months? I mean, you don't think that's a ton of effort?
Oh, I
Like,
mean, he's done it. He can do it in spurts. I said that at the very beginning of the show when he got hired.
And, here's
When
the other thing.
he went to 4-8 in 2016,
He
for the
keeps on
next
getting
6 to 8
made fun
months, he
of
did a pretty good job.
for
He
these
did that last
recruiting
year.
videos where he's going viral, but guess what?
I don't care about
He's
freaking
dancing with a
recruiting.
recruit.
I don't care about that. One of the kids he danced with signed with Alabama.
Well, I've talked to a lot of recruits, and almost consistently, all of these recruits tell me, "Yeah, I've talked
Let's
to Coach
see if
Kelly.
he can
He's
do
a
it
good
for
guy."
long term. Let's see if he can do it long term. We've seen flashes like this. So again, my point is you're making a statement based off what you knew about LSU for the last. How long have you covered LSU, Press? It seems like it's been a while, right?
Well, I look. Let's put it like this: I've been close to the program for 25 years.
Okay, so you're going off what you've seen. You're basing us on what you've seen. You're mad at me because I'm giving you an opinion about a coach.
Well, hold on.
I have seen the last 12 years.
I'm not mad at you, Brian. I'm not mad at you. I just think you're all.
Oh, we're having some fun here, dude. It's all
I'm
okay.
not
They're
mad
at me.
But
We're having
I do
this
think
debate
this is a pretty
because
rough
of the
take.
opinion
I'm
I have about a guy for 12 years.
I'm going to throw it out there. Look, man. I mean, yeah. Do I think it takes much to bring in Shelton Sampson, who grew up rooting for LSU? You know how many guys I've talked to on the phone who I'm like, dude, did you grow up rooting for LSU? Yeah, dog. I got LSU gear on all 4 walls around me.
Okay.
I mean, it happens all the time.
Sure.
You don't have to do much to do these kids. Just do the basics. And my point is that Notre Dame, you can't just do the basics and bring.
I never said you could
because they didn't grow up Notre Dame.
But see, so let me ask you this question, right? How would you compare the teams? Because this is what I hear from SEC fans all the time. Notre Dame don't play anybody. Don't play anybody. Right? Would you say you're someone that believes in that? They don't play the kind of schedule
don't believe that at all. No, I think that's a cliche point. And certainly not this year, by the way.
So you
This
do
year
realize
is
that's something that the vast. Oh yeah. Well, the 2017 schedule is pretty tough too.
But Notre Dame plays just as many top 25 teams as really.
They haven't recently though.
Let me tell you where
2017 they played 8 top 25 teams.
Notre Dame dodges Oklahoma. They dodge Alabama.
Dodges Oklahoma. You know, Brian Kelly played Oklahoma
right?
twice, right?
Regular season.
They played Oklahoma twice in Kelly's tenure.
They
scheduled Texas. They have Alabama slated in like 4 or 5 years.
I'm just telling you where I think they get the bad.
They have Ohio State this year, next year.
They avoid those top 5s.
Well, how do you say avoid? How do they avoid?
By just being independent and not having them in their conference. That's it. And they take on USC.
But they still play those teams.
When USC was running, man, doing their thing. Yeah, that's a big piece. I just think that's where the national perception is, just because you don't have the consistent of those top 2 or 3.
So in the last
top 25 teams,
in the last 12
don't you
years,
think they play as many top 25 teams as anybody?
Last year they played one team that finished the year and ranked in the top 25. Now, and again, part of this is bad luck, right? So if I'd have told you 6 years ago that Notre Dame is going to play at Florida State, Wisconsin, and Chicago, they're going to play Cincinnati, USC, and Stanford. If I'd have told you that 6 years ago, you're like, dude, that is a brutal schedule. brutal schedule, because 6 years ago, we're talking about Florida State not being far from a national championship. Stanford was still really good. USC was having some 10-win seasons. You'd have looked at that schedule like, that's going to be a tough schedule. So part of that is not Brian Kelly's fault. It's not his fault that USC has been down the last 6-7 years. You can't fault the guy for that. That has benefited in his record. And same thing with Stanford. Brian Kelly has beaten Stanford. I'm trying to think, Preston. So 17, so in 18, 19, and 21, he's won 3 in a row against Stanford. And he still finished his career with a losing record against Stanford. Because when Stanford was good, Brian Kelly couldn't beat him. Well, rarely. Didn't say couldn't. Rarely. I'm going to be specific in my terms. Started 2-5, I think, against Stanford. Well, then Stanford declined and they started winning. USC hasn't had a legitimately good team, although they did beat one pretty good
every
USC
metric
team
I've
in
ever seen
2017.
has Notre Dame up in the top 20 in
Sure.
terms of scheduling strength, man.
Well, but in recent years, it hasn't been. Look, I'm just giving you data, right? So
I believe Notre Dame plays a tougher schedule than like a lot of teams say in the ACC. Like I look at Miami's schedule this year.
What are the odds that LSU is going to go through a season and at the end of the year, they only play one team that finished ranked in the top 25? Or 2 or 3. Okay, right. That's happen. So again, I'm not blaming Brian Kelly for the schedule. I think Notre Dame has tried. And they can't. It's not their fault that Miami has been down, right? It's not their fault that USC has been down. It's not their fault that a road game against Florida State that 5 years ago would have looked like a really tough game is not because Florida State's down.
Lamar Stevens puts up a super chat here. Thank you for the super chat, Lamar Stevens. What does staffing not go into the Brian Kelly LSU prediction? Sure. I mean, do you know anything about the guys he's brought down?
I do. Actually, I've talked about the stats. I just talked about Mike Denbrock.
I think
Matt House was a really good defensive coordinator hire. I think that's where the recruiting is from. That's what I said to you earlier, is that you're acting as if Brian Kelly's the reason they're getting those guys, and I'm saying they're not. Mike Denbrock was a beast on the recruiting trail during his tenure at Notre Dame. But then they would have coaches literally beg Brian Kelly to call recruits, and he wouldn't do it. Now, maybe he changes it at LSU, right? There's always that, right, Preston? You got to give someone an opportunity to say, you know what? Maybe the last 4 or 5 years in Notre Dame, he just was kind of over it, right? Didn't want to be there anymore. Didn't want to put in the work. Maybe that's the case. And now that he's LSU, it's a fresh start. He's going to be a different guy. That could be true. That could be true. But if he recruits the way he did at LSU that he did at Notre Dame, he's not going to win because it's a different standard. It's a different type of going through the regular season type of thing. You've never heard me say, oh, the SEC schedules are soft and all that kind of stuff. But the reality is Notre Dame has benefited in recent years from playing schedules that aren't that hard. And when they have had tougher schedules, they've lost more games. In 2015, for example, Notre Dame had a starting offensive football team, had a second-round pick at quarterback, a third-round pick at running back, a first-round pick at wide receiver. You had 3 first-round picks on your offensive line and a second-round pick on your offensive line and a tight end that went and got drafted. And you had the most explosive linebacker in all of college football, and they went 1-3 against ranked teams that year, and the only win was against Navy. LSU fans are going to tolerate that.
So LSU's had 93 players drafted in the last since 2009, right? Sure. And I'm gonna be honest, man. Look, I don't know that I see any different. I see Ryan Kelly working harder than I saw Les Miles recruiting. I mean, Ogeron was a recruiter, but I just don't see any reason why you wouldn't see that. And the staff is
because again, Preston, here's my thing. You're basing it off of what you've seen in a short period of time. Guy just got hired. He's clearly got something to prove. He's got a roster he's got to fix, right? That's what you just said. I'm basing my opinion off of what I saw from him for 12 years.
That Notre Dame had the talent. They just
to be a better football team than they've been. Absolutely.
He's not going to recruit at LSU the way he needs.
Right.
What is it?
Because you're working with this assumption that the head coach is the one doing all the recruiting. And what I'm telling you, the difference between being a good football team that's got good players and being a team that can legitimately, consistently get on the field and play with Bama, play with Clemson, play with Georgia, play with Ohio State. You need a coach that's willing to go the extra mile, and that's where Brian Kelly struggled. He had coaches that saved his butt. I've made this argument. I could be wrong.
As long as he just
he's had coaches that saved his butt.
What he's been doing LSU recruiting, he's fine then. Because he's bringing in talent.
We'll see.
Right at the level he brought in talent. Right at the level Ed Ogeron and Les Miles brought in talent, and he's doing a better job keeping them there too.
Well, I mean, his current class is ranked lower than Ed Orgeron's last 2 full classes. I mean, so
Okay, but did you see the transfer portal class he brought in? That's half his class. I mean,
let's see if
that's a
the
little
transfer portal can
short-sighted
work
just
when
to look
you're
at his
completely
recruiting class
rendering
he
your roster.
inherited
I
a
mean,
month before signing day. I
you
mean, how
can't.
can you expect him to?
Let's
He
see how
got
they
12
do.
players in that
Let's see how
class.
they do. I mean, not all those guys.
By
You're
the
acting
way,
like all those
in
guys were
between
former
in that 1
5-time
month
players.
on that class that wasn't so
Okay.
great, he brought in Harold freaking Perkins, who's the best
Okay.
player in the
Great.
country.
He brought in a good player. That's great.
He brought
That's
in a
great.
good player and kept a lot of
Wonderful.
other good players on board.
Sure. Lost some
And
too. And that's part of
he
recruiting when
needed
you
to
have a
hit that
coaching
transfer
transition.
portal, man, because like we
Sure.
both agree, the roster was a dumpster fire.
Yeah.
And then he brought in why would he want a number 1 recruiting class?
I'm not worried about a
that
number 1
should
recruiting
foolish
class.
to me
I'm
to
just
have that
talking about.
expectation.
Look, we'll find out, right? Because we're both arguing what you think based on a short period of time and what I think a long period of time. We'll find out. Maybe Brian Kelly had a personality infusion. Maybe he did. And he's now going to continue to recruit year after year after year. I don't think he is. And that's where my comments were coming from. If I'm
I
wrong,
think
I'll be
his
wrong.
newly inherited Southern accent is what's going to push him over the top. And he's going to all of a sudden bring in 5 stars left and right, and boom, watch, man. Look, these Southern accents down here, man, they get it done. You know what I'm saying? All right, let's see here.
So once he brought his family down, he was good to go,
Once he
right?
puts
So
the family down. That's exactly right. That's exactly right. All right,
well,
here's where I'm gonna get a little tougher on you. Okay, so look,
you're gonna get
mentioned
tougher
sour
on me.
grapes.
Okay, let's have
Tougher.
it.
Okay, well, look, man, I got people in the comments telling me go tougher on you, man.
They
You
want
know,
you to hurl
like-
insults, make fun of my size or whatever, but you know,
Ryan, you need
I've
to
enjoyed
trim
it
your
so
beard
far,
up a
yeah.
little better. I'm gonna be
I
honest.
hate
those
people's
edges could be
beards.
straighter. I hate you. Okay. So look, look, obviously sour grapes, the elephant in the room, man. You've had some like public feuds with Bryan Kelly,
Sure.
right? Like you butted heads with him very publicly.
Yeah, but it was always about football up until he said some things about Notre Dame that I didn't like when he left. But when he was here, it was always about football.
Okay, so so you covered the program. Obviously, I mean, we all try to be unbiased, but obviously there's some love for Notre Dame for you.
I mean, it's my job, right?
Right.
I take pride in the fact that people view me as an objective person. Notre Dame fan.
So you've butted heads with Bryan Kelly. He left the school covering, right, and went to another program, which is somewhat of a slap in the face on top of the public feuds. What I'm going to ask you is, for someone who has that information and the outside looking in, how could they not look at that as sour grapes?
Well, it would only be sour grapes if I wanted him to stay, right? Like, how could it be sour grapes if I had said publicly before he left that I wanted him to be gone? Like, wouldn't I be happy that he was leaving?
Well, I'm going to ask you that because that's another good question. You said you wanted him gone after 2020 is what you said.
And what I said was because I think he had taken the program as far as he can take it.
But I don't understand, like, how could you say he's in the playoffs? You know what I mean? Like he's literally in the playoffs.
Do you think there was another level he could have taken the program?
But honestly, so
no,
Brian,
I'm asking do you think there's another level he could have taken the program?
Brian, I'm not sure there's another level that anybody could have taken the program at that point.
Okay,
I think Notre Dame
fine.
I mean, maybe if the stars align. Notre Dame's a program that can, but I just think it's very difficult at this point. I think Notre Dame's got a lot of structural problems. It's the academic standards, the culture.
So whatever the justification, you think he had gone as far as he can go,
standards,
right?
making it tough to transfer into the school.
Right.
In this day and age of the transfer portal, I think Bryan Kelly's a smart man and saw that and realized that he's going to have.
So we agree then. We agree
at Notre Dame.
That he had taken the program as far as he could, right?
I think he did as good a job as just about anybody could do at Notre Dame.
That's fine, but it's still the end result. You think that he had taken the program as far as he can. Now you'd say, I don't think he can go further. That's fine. That's fair. You can have that conversation. And I can say, no, I think he can go further. Neither of us know. We're going to find out, right? Like, I mean, that's the thing is, like, you say, hey, you wanted him gone. Well, you're going to find out, so if you're right, then the program's going to take a step back. Because if Bryan Kelly took it as far as anyone can go, then there's nowhere further to go. You're going to take a step back, right? What I'm saying to you is that I think it can go another step. We'll find out if it can or can't. Okay, but you agree with my comment then that Bryan Kelly could not take the Notre Dame program any further.
There's only a step or two further than that. And in the last 30 years,
it's been a competitive
a lot farther behind that. I just don't understand how you could get to that pinnacle and then say, Now
What
we need a
pinnacle?
new coach.
What pinnacle?
Well, the pinnacle of Notre Dame's success over the last 34 years. The pinnacle of Notre
Okay.
Dame's success in the last 34
What
years
does that
is
mean?
Brian Kelly.
What does that mean?
It means
I'm not arguing. I'm trying to understand
it
what
means
you mean
the
by
best
pinnacle of
they've done in 34 years.
Sure. Well, close. Yeah.
I mean, what's
For a
better in the last
sustained period of
34
time,
years?
for a sustained period of time, no question.
What's
No
been better
question.
than that?
They've had a year here and a year there,
But
right?
wait,
But as
no,
far
no.
as
What
sustained
year?
success,
What year here there? 'Cause,
05.
that
Charlie
05
Weiss
went
team
to
was a
the
really
Sugar
good
Bowl.
team.
I think we
Yeah,
can
no,
agree that Charlie Weiss Sugar Bowl team was probably
wasn't a
not
very
as
good
good as
team.
the Brian
wasn't a
Kelly
very good
teams that were good.
That wasn't the 06 team wasn't very good. The 05 team was really good. The team that
05
took
team was
USC
okay.
down
That,
the
that
wire.
Bush push,
Right.
I got screwed on. I'll
Yeah.
admit that.
That was a
But
good team. No one has had the sustained success that Brian Kelly's, and you've never heard me make that argument otherwise. There's no question. I think where you and I would agree, and this is a different show, is who deserves most of the credit for that. Most people are going to give it to Brian Kelly from an outsider looking in, and Brian Kelly has done a great job of making sure everyone gave him the credit for that. The argument we would have is that I think he held them back, in my opinion. Now, again, that's as someone who's covered the football team for 12 years. So when I look at it, the reality is that there comes a point in time where you say, okay, is this what the standard is at Notre Dame? Right. And there's a lot of other factors that go into it that say, look, if you think this is the best that they can do, that's fair. But the reality is that my statement was correct, and it's one you agree with. Brian Kelly had taken the program as far as it can go. I want to see if someone else can take it further. You don't think they can. I do. We'll find out. We'll find out over the next several years if that's true or not. But that's the reality of it, right? So I think Brian Kelly has taken the program as far as it can go. I don't think Brian Kelly's a good coach. I don't think Brian Kelly's going to recruit based on what I've seen. No, not now. No, not now.
All right, no. I'm glad you said that again.
Yeah.
You keep on like I have these bullet points to get to, and you keep on leading them in for me. Okay, so
I'm trying to set you up, Preston. This is your show.
I'm
trying to make you look
here.
good.
I'm twisting my mustache for you. Okay, so you said he's not the coach he was at Cincinnati, and he's not the coach he was at Grand Valley State.
No. I was a big Brian Kelly guy when they hired him.
How can you say that when 6 of the last 7 years was his best stretch he's ever had?
Yeah. Because I don't view him as being the primary reason for that success. That's really the big reason why.
What's the primary reason?
I'll explain. It's not the primary reason to me is, number one, let's say this about Brian Kelly. So what people need to understand is I think Brian Kelly was the right guy at the time he got hired. There's no question about that. I was a big pro Brian Kelly guy. I think that if they would have hired, there was other guys like Kirk Ferentz got offered the job before Brian Kelly got offered the job. I think Kirk Ferentz would have done a good job at Notre Dame. They would have been a very steady program, kind of like he's been at Iowa, but there was no potential for that next level. And I actually thought Brian Kelly was a guy that could be that. And the thing that's kind of disappointed me about Brian Kelly over the last several years is they've just out-talented teams week after week. I mean, again, 44-0 against unranked teams, 10-10 against ranked teams, right? I mean, and some of the ranked wins are like Syracuse. They've got 2 wins over a ranked Navy team during that stretch of time. They got a win over a 9-5 ranked Northwestern team. They've gone to 1-6 against top 5 teams. They've beat the teams that they're just better than. They haven't beaten teams that are kind of on their level. And so that's a big part of it. But you look at some of the different things. I think that Brian Kelly, when I say that, what does it mean? When he first got to Notre Dame, he was the primary play caller. He was, I thought, and you got to understand, I had been studying Brian Kelly since like 2001. That's when I got into coaching, college coaching. He was the D2 level. I was at the D3 level, and I loved his Grand Valley offenses. I mean, he won 2 titles at Grand Valley. He should have won 3. A lot of people don't know this. Notre Dame fans do because we've talked about it. The year before they won their first 2 titles, his starting quarterback got knocked out in the playoffs. Hey, if he doesn't get knocked out of the playoffs, they steamroll through the year, and he's got 3 titles. He was incredibly innovative as an offensive coach. I think there was a stretch over 2 years where, Preston, they averaged almost 60 points a game. I don't care what level you're coaching at. When you're that dominant over a period of time, you're doing a great job. He goes to Central Michigan, inherits a garbage program at that time. Year 1, they're bad, losing record. By year 3, they're a 10-win team with Dan Lefevre at quarterback. Do you remember him? Kid ended up going to the NFL. I think played for the Lions for a minute.
Dan Lefevre.
Goes to Cincinnati.
I remember. Right. I mean, I remember the hype with Brian Kelly to Cincinnati.
And Mark D'Antonio had done a nice job at Cincinnati. They were like a 7 and 8 win team kind of every year. And then Brian Kelly takes them to that next level. They went to the Orange Bowl in 2008. And they had to play 5 quarterbacks that year because of injuries and other different things going on. And then, of course, we saw what he did in 2009. So that guy was fiery. He was aggressive. He was a get after it play caller. He was innovative. That's not Bryan Kelly anymore. Bryan Kelly now is a guy that coaches not to lose. He's a guy that has not been a great game day coach, if we're going to be honest, in the last several years. He's a guy that doesn't get his teams ready for big games. We've talked to players during his tenure. We've talked to players. They've been more vocal about it since he's left, about how like we were always super tight and tense going into big games, right? You got to get a team mentally and emotionally ready to play. Notre Dame rarely did that. They never looked like they were just kind of ready to physically go beat those teams. And I'm not talking about Clemson and Alabama. We can kind of take them away and say, hey, you know, that's a different standard, right? Like, hey, you know who else can't beat Alabama and Clemson? Most other teams can't beat Alabama and Clemson with any kind of consistency, especially if you give Nick Saban a month to prepare, right? Like, there's not a lot of people beat. Who's the only coach to beat Nick Saban with a month to prepare? Urban Meyer? Is that the only one? I mean, I think that's the only one, correct? As far as the playoff teams, they've never lost.
Only coach to what?
I said they've never lost a semifinal game other than the Ohio State game in 14, right? Alabama.
Oh, Urban Meyer, yeah.
I mean, so the only time he's lost a playoff game with a month to prepare was to Urban Meyer, who's the second best coach of this generation behind Nick Saban. Would we agree on that?
And then right behind him is Dabo Swinney. But it seems to me like those are kind of his boogaboo's when he's got, you know, all his ducks lined up.
But those were teams that could talent-wise go toe-to-toe with Nick Saban. I mean,
I tend to agree with my guy Lamar here. You know, it seems like he came in to a broken program and eventually got it on the right track.
He's always been that
maybe
guy.
Given
That's
the
why
time,
I was a pro Bryan Kelly guy.
Overcame the obstacles and could have competed for a championship at
Where? You talking about Notre Dame?
Yeah, I think he could have eventually. But I just think there's some uphill battles there. And the fact that he was as close for as long as he was. But
he wasn't close though. Was he really close though? I mean you always tell me they were never competitive. I mean, it's fine. Washington got in the playoff. Michigan State got in the playoff. Cincinnati got in the playoff. They weren't close to winning a championship.
Well, and they couldn't sustain it like Bryan Kelly had. I mean, they're talking, you know, the last 2 seasons, Bryan Kelly had them right there. You know,
10-10 against top 25 teams the last 5 years. And so like, here's an example. Here's what people will say. Okay, well, after the 4-8 year, he made great hires. Okay, that's fine. From an outsider, I would understand why you'd feel that way. Here's what I know as an insider, and I knew it at the time, and I know it to be true now. Bryan Kelly was trying hard to get out of Notre Dame at that time. Hard. And this is directly from people involved in the search. He was not the one that led the search that brought in Mike Elko or Chip Long. He was not. He was trying to.
So he wasn't involved in hiring coaches?
No, not for that year, because it's that one staff that went from the 4-8 to the 10-3, right? That's the turnaround Notre Dame had. So like the last 5 years' success followed a 4-8 season. Disaster of a season. You can shake your head all you want. I was covering the team at the time.
I get it. I get it. Well, let me tell you why I was shaking my head before you know.
Mm-hmm.
I've covered the team for 6 months.
Sure.
Which is almost 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm sorry, 12 years. But I feel like he built an exceptional staff at LSU.
No. I feel like
he
said
a lot of resources.
The 2016 season. You asked me why I don't think he's the primary person responsible.
I'm telling you why I was shaking my head, what I was thinking in my head.
Okay. So I have not banged on him for the coaching staff. I got to know Robert Steeples a little bit. Robert Steeples interviewed for the cornerback's job 2 years ago for the 2020 season. He actually interviewed for the Notre Dame cornerback's job and ended up going to Mike Mickens. I got a chance to know Coach Steeples then. I like Robert Steeples. I think he's a good football coach. I thought Matt House was a good hire. I told you I'm a Mike Denbrock fan. I like Kerry Cooks. I think the special teams coach was a bad hire, but, you know, it's a freaking special teams coach. Who cares?
Well, I thought the special teams coach was a pretty good hire, though.
No, it's terrible. You're going to find out. You're going to find out real soon. That was not a good
I don't know, man.
Okay,
I'm a
what do I know? I've only been Bryan Foley last 12 years. So, but anyway,
it's a pretty prolific. That's a pretty strong resume for a special teams coach. I mean, my goodness,
okay.
He's been behind getting a lot of these guys at LSU.
Agree to disagree. I'm talking about as a special teams coach. Brian Polian did a good job as a recruiter. I said as a special teams coach.
That's you know.
Okay, good job, not a great job, good job, and he helped by having other guys that were with him. But anyway, so he was trying to leave. Mike Elko and Chip Long were great hires, I felt, but he was not the driver for that. That was Jack Swarbrick and Chad Klunder. They were driving that because Brian Kelly was trying to leave. He was going to hire a strength coach from USC, which was terrible because their strength and conditioning programs have been bad for a decade. Bob Diaco got fired at UConn. He called up Brian Kelly and said, hey, you got to hire my strength coach. We just got let go. This guy's a good strength coach. He calls him, and so Brian Kelly hires Matt Balis, who has been – you ask the players the last 5 years, who's the number one person responsible for the success they've had? Every single player will tell you it's Matt Balis. Right? Jack Swarbrick went out and got him everything he needed. They've done a ton of renovations. That he went out when Brian Kelly – like one of the things I've given Brian Kelly –
he didn't get him enough to keep Brian Kelly there, though.
Well, that was a choice.
I mean, but
flat out. We can get it. Let's not get too far ahead. Let's finish up this one point.
I'm going to call you out on the claim here, just because there's a lot of systemic issues at Notre Dame, such as
Preston. You were breaking up. I didn't hear the last thing you said. You started fading out. What were you cutting me off for?
Don't you think there was still some systemic problems with winning championships, not necessarily quality university?
Well, I guess I would phrase it differently. I think I understand where you're coming from. I don't think I have never ever said that it's as easy to win at Notre Dame as it is anywhere else. Never said that. Never said that. I think it is harder to win at Notre Dame than it is most places. Not all. I mean, there's a lot of places where I'd much rather be Notre Dame than Georgia Tech, right? Northwestern, Syracuse, right? But when you look at Alabama, Ohio State, the path is easier. Don't disagree with that, okay? But that's why you have to be someone that puts in the work. I don't think it's as easy to just walk out and roll a ball out and go win a championship at LSU. I think that there's not enough credit given to the other people involved. Just let me finish. There's not enough credit given to the other people involved. You just said an idiot won the last. Well, it's an idiot. I don't know if you said.
I didn't say idiot,
bad
but
coach,
I think we were. Look, you must have been thinking that, though. I think that was a little.
No, I think Ed Orgeron's fun. I don't think he's the smartest guy in the world, but I don't think he's an idiot. And that's why
he's certainly not the coach Brian Kelly is, no doubt.
But he did have really good assistant coaches, correct? Right, Dave Aranda is one of the best defensive minds, and I'm talking about the title team. The title team.
The coaching staff.
Since then, no.
The coaching staff with Ed Orgeron was notoriously inconsistent.
Right,
that was
but
almost
that
the signature of his career is the rotating door of 1 year we're going to go with this guy, then next year we're going to pull out, then we're going to fire Matt Canada, and then we're
19 team is the one I'm talking about. Right,
the 19 team had a perfect
coach.
Storm, right?
Yes, exactly. Now maybe Brian Kelly can walk into that. Right? Because I think Dave Aranda is excellent. I thought the Joe Brady hire, with the veteran that you already had, and I always get his last name wrong. What was the actual OC on that football team's name? I always forget.
Actual OC. His name was Steve Ensminger, right? He called the plays.
Yes, thank you.
Joe Brady kind of had the playbook, right?
Right.
It just kind of worked, and
everything clicked. Right? Everything clicked that year.
Right.
And my whole thing is maybe that happens for Brian Kelly, but how can you possibly predict that in 6 years the perfect storm is going to come together and you're going to win? What I'm saying is that
it's happened about once every 6 years in the last 20 years.
And maybe it does happen for Brian Kelly.
And quite frankly, those stars have also aligned a couple other times. I thought that 2013 LSU team was a team like we're talking about. Okay, Odell Beckham, Jarvis Landry,
refresh my memory of that team. Who was the quarterback on that team? I remember Odell was on it. Jarvis was on it. Who was the quarterback? Okay, yeah. He's the kid that transferred from Georgia,
I think
right?
That's a team. What's that?
That's a kid that transferred from Georgia, right?
Correct. Yes.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a team where the stars also aligned.
Yeah.
And the stars align a lot here at LSU is my point. And a lot of times the coaching has been so – how do you lose 3 games with that team?
Right.
Because
I would make the same case about the 2015 Notre Dame.
And Newt Rockney's calling plays out there,
Right.
I think
other than the fact that you think every kid at LSU, and I'm saying this –
I think a top 25 coach at LSU alone will win a championship. To say
that again?
I'm saying I think a top 25 coach at LSU, given how often these stars align.
Well, first of all, I think Nick Saban won 2 titles at LSU, if you ask me. All right. I mean, that roster was built a lot on the back of the success and the foundation that Nick Saban had laid, right? I mean, that's why Ed won one in 2007 and then couldn't quite get over the hump over that, right? I mean, that's a reality. It's like that's one of the questions.
If you're going to argue that, I'll say Nick Saban won 3 championships at LSU because so full disclosure, the fence started to be built up when Nick Saban got there. 01, the best recruiting class out of Louisiana like we've ever seen. He's locked it down
Who was
for
that
generations
class?
to come.
Who was that class?
Michael Clayton.
Okay, I remember him.
What's his name?
He was the
Left
receiver,
tackle.
right?
What's that? Yeah,
The
wide
receiver?
receiver
Yep.
guy. We're talking oh man, why am I blanking here? Andrew Whitworth. Okay. Brought in Matt Mock.
Can you still believe he just now finished playing?
Yeah, no, it's unbelievable. It's unreal, man. He's so old and he just finished playing. Yeah,
more
Marcus
great is beard than
Spears
I do.
was
He won a
there.
Super Bowl.
Marcus Spears, big 5-star. It was about 6 or 7 5-star guys. Man. It was unreal.
That actually played like 5 stars when they got to college. That's the thing.
Those
guys did.
And from that point on, it's been a cultural movement. So if you're going to give Nick Saban credit for 07, you got to give him credit for 19 because that's just how it works. Look, do you think that Notre Dame's in a better position to compete for a championship with Marcus Freeman than they were with Brian Kelly?
I mean, I'll say this. I think that Notre Dame is in a better position to consistently have better players. It's hard for me to, I could sit here and if we wanted to kind of have this tit for tat, I'll say this. Marcus Freeman hasn't coached a single game with this coaching staff. I have confidence that he's going to take this program to the next step. I've gotten to know Coach Freeman. I've studied his defenses when he was at Cincinnati. I've been around the program he's covered. I think he has the traits. It's kind of like when Clark Lee got hired in 2018 as the defensive coordinator. And one of the big questions was, how can you be excited about that guy? He's never called a game. I said, look, I'm a believer, Preston, in coaching. And I've been around a lot of coaches over the years, whether it's, guys that were great at the Division III level, spent time with Division I coaches, NFL coaches, all that kind of stuff. I've kind of developed a philosophy over the years that if you got the chops, you got the chops, right? Like some guys need 20 years of experience before they're ready to be great. I think some guys just have that ability to they know the game, they know how to teach it, they know how to connect, they know how to get kids to run through a wall for them, all that kind of stuff. And I saw it with Clark Lee, right? So if you see a coach, then you say, hey, look, I think this guy's got the chops, right? And my point is like I feel like Marcus Freeman has the chops based on what I've seen. We know he can recruit, right? He already has a class right now that if they finish with the 2 kids that right now they lead for, this class will be their highest ranked class since 2008. It's already better than last year was Brian Kelly's highest ranked class on 247 Sports since 2013. And this class is already way ahead of that. They just need to land one more recruit for it to be just points wise. I mean, all we can go is off of like, when a team,
services,
right? I mean, because we haven't seen these kids play a game yet, right? Like somebody says, "Do you think this group will be better than that group?" I don't know. I can't sit there and say that Braylon James is gonna be better than Will Fuller or Jaden Alsbury is gonna be better than James. I haven't seen these kids play a game yet, right? But as far as getting kids that I look at their film and I say that kid can play, that kid adds an element that they don't have. This is the kind of kid they haven't had. I mean, the reality is Notre Dame's current class right now has 3 kids that have timed in the 4.3s. One kid they got from Houston ran a 10.3 in the 100-meter dash, 20.89 on the 200-meter dash. Peyton Bowen went this summer at the Future 50, ran a 4.38, and then got beat by Dylan Edwards in the event there, who also beat Zachariah Branch. I always get the Branch brothers confused. Zachariah is the one in this class, and Nathaniel was in last year's class. Am I correct? I always get those two, the kids from Las Vegas. I always get which one is in this. I think it's Zachariah is in this one, right? So he went out and beat them. So like they got 3 kids that run into 4.3s, right? Like now, isn't that what you said has been the problem in Notre Dame is not having that dynamic speed?
Collectively, the speed, right?
That's kind of what he's going out and fixing, right? They got another cornerback from St. Louis that went to Ohio State's camp, and as reported, he showed the card that they gave him, and he ran a 4.4 flat and a 4.42. Braylon James is a receiver they got from Texas who ran a 4.47 electronic time. I mean, so that's the thing you look and say, okay, some of the things that have been, like I've always said, Notre Dame has always had athletes. The difference between Notre Dame, like I said this about the 2012 team, you take the 5 best players at Notre Dame in 2012, and they can flat out stack up against the 5 best players Alabama had in 2012. The problem is 6 through 20. It's not close.
Wait. Did you say the top 5 players at Notre Dame?
Yeah.
In 2012?
Yeah.
Oh, bro.
I mean, Zach Martin. Hold on now. Zach Martin.
Dude, no way. I'm not even going to waste my time with that. So we've been
hold on.
No.
You're going to tell me that who are Notre Dame's 5 best players in 2012?
I'm not even going down that route. There's just
who are Notre Dame's 5 best players in 2012?
Alabama talent-wise just completely smoked.
Of course.
Notre
You
Dame
didn't hear what I said.
I know. I get it. I don't think you could find like 10 players or 5 players more talent. No, I don't. I'm not buying that.
The best guard in the NFL the last 10 years couldn't play at Alabama. Zach Martin.
Yeah, look, man.
You're telling me that Zach Martin couldn't have played at Alabama.
Was through the
Tyler Eifert couldn't have played at Alabama. You're telling me Randy McWilliams is better than Tyler Eifert.
AJ McCarron was absurdly talented, man. There's just
I never said they weren't talented. What I said was, you look at we're talking first round draft pick.
The 5 best players.
The 5 best players at Notre Dame could stack up against the 5 best players against Alabama. The difference is that 6 through 20, it's not even close.
Look, man. I'll invite you to look, like tweet me and we'll go through this and we'll debate it here. I'm gonna need to look at it on paper.
Sure.
My memory and go back 10 years perfectly and vividly to remember it.
Sure.
I'll give you the 5 and then you can
chew on it later.
I get you. Okay.
Let me give you the 5 and you can chew on it later. Zach Martin.
Hold up. Let's just tweet that out. I don't want to lose people on the show here tonight. That's a whole different debate. I feel like we've gone through all our points here. And I feel like, I promised I would be respectful, not take any shots at you. I feel like I've done that. I also promised you I'd be very tough on you. Sure. I also feel like I did that well.
Yeah. No doubt.
And I think that, we both disagree. I'm going to just give my monologue real quick on, I think Brian Kelly can and should win a national championship at LSU.
Should, yes.
I think the talent in this state is what has fueled all these special teams. I look at that 19 team, Jamar Chase, Louisiana. Justin Jefferson, Louisiana. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Louisiana. You find a few offensive linemen, you find a few you get a quarterback, and you've got your team built, man. And that's the recipe to success. I mean, Tyrann Mathieu, Louisiana. There's so many. Michael Clayton, Louisiana. So much speed, so much talent. It just doesn't produce trench play, and it doesn't produce quarterback. And I think that it's very easy to get the stars to align here. Yeah. What's that?
There's some. I mean, you at least can get a Will Blackwell.
There's Lance Hurd in Neville, right?
You can head over to Texas and get some kids like that.
More. You need more. You can get your handful of guys. You can get defensive linemen.
Well, dude, you guys have come up north and gotten a couple kids. You got the kid from Illinois. What was it?
That's right. We have to go out to the cornfields.
What was the kid's name?
Come on, bud.
Didn't he start on your?
And that's the hope, is that Brian Kelly will be able to use his connections to actually do that and develop quarterbacks. You can't develop quarterbacks worse than they've been developed at LSU. That's a no.
I would raise you a Notre Dame.
Well, we'll have in 3 years. I'll have you back on.
I'll take a Joe Burrow at Notre Dame. Okay.
Look, man. I believe that I've seen Ed Ogeron do it, and through it all, he was just a goofy guy, completely incompetent. I saw Les Miles do it, and he ran, like I said, the Newt Rockne offense, only the 2013 version of it. Basically run a wishbone and a toss dive out there.
He didn't run a wishbone. But I get
I knew you would be able to actually correct me on the technicalities.
That's Darryl Royal.
He actually ran, but it was more reminiscent of that than it was of like a modern offense. You know what I mean? And I saw those guys win championships and blow championships with obscene amounts of talent that was homegrown, and not to mention able to tap into Texas, able to tap into other areas. And LSU now has that national brand where kids recognize it as winning championships. I think Brian Kelly should win a national championship by the end of his 10-year contract. And I think the pieces are there.
We agree on one thing. We agree on one thing. He should. I think LSU is a program where if you go a decade and you haven't won a title, somebody's not doing something right. Right. And I've actually argued, I think LSU got screwed out of a title in 2011. Or at least a title shot. They had no business getting a rematch against Alabama. You lost at home to LSU. You had no business getting a rematch. And because when is LSU going to get their chance for home game that year? You want to go best out of 3 and go back to Baton Rouge the next week? That pisses me off.
And by the way, that 2011 team is the second best team in LSU history.
I would have
loved. Was so damn fun to watch.
That was such a sucky game.
So dominant. And it just got flushed down the toilet. Thanks, Nick Saban. I kind of felt like we were even after that. Thanks for building the program into what it is, Coach. But after that, hey, maybe
that was such an unfortunate thing, because you can't expect a team to go on the road, beat Bama in Tuscaloosa, and then win a rematch. It's just it wasn't fair. I would have loved to have watched the Oklahoma State LSU, because that's what the title game should have been. It should have been LSU against Oklahoma State. That would have been a fun game to watch. Because if you remember,
I think it was just one of those things that was so easy to tell that okay, Alabama was obviously better than Oklahoma State. Doesn't
Right.
matter who deserved
But they didn't
it.
deserve to be in
They
it. I
just
think
threw 'em
better or
in there.
not, you have to earn it on the field, and I didn't think they earned that chance on the field. But anyway,
Garen, thank you, Garen, for the compliment. I see
yeah.
your Notre Dame hat. I felt like
They
we did do an honest debate. I gave my
should
monologue.
win a title. I don't think that they will. That's based off what I've
You
seen
think
last
they
12 years.
should, but they don't?
I think they should, because I think LSU is a program where if you go a decade and you haven't won a title, you're not doing it right. What I think Nick Saban did is I don't think Nick Saban turned LSU into something it wasn't. I think LSU went through a long period of time where they just weren't hiring the kind of coaches that could get the most out of it. I also think, because we've talked about this, when Notre Dame won a title in '88, you could go to Pennsylvania and get Ricky Waters, and you could get Rocket Ismail. You could go to Detroit or Lansing, Michigan, and get Todd Light. You can't get those kind of athletes out of there now because we've seen population shifts over the last 30 years that have seen more people go south. I mean, just look at the Electoral College in 1988 in Pennsylvania, Ohio, and all those, and then compare it to where it is now, right? It's a complete shift. So a lot of kids that used to get produced in the North, like think about the players Notre Dame produced in the 80s and 90s. Jerome Bettis from Detroit, Todd Light, first-round pick, number 4 pick from Lansing, Michigan, Rocket Ismail, most explosive player I've ever seen from Pennsylvania, Ricky Waters, Pennsylvania. They just doesn't produce the athletes like that anymore now. So LSU has also seen a rise in talent over the last 20, 30 years too. And some coaches didn't take advantage of that. Nick Saban started. I think what Nick Saban did was turned LSU into what it should have been. Right. And that's what I think he's done. And now he's changed the standard of what it should be to be successful at LSU, right?
Yeah, like Ed Reed and Ward, all those guys, they should have never left this state. LSU has always been that sleeping dragon. They just needed the guy to like line the sheep up and get it ordered. And that's why Bryan Kelly is the sheriff in town. He's the organized, structured, no nonsense guy that LSU has needed for so long.
But I don't think but here's the thing. This is the thing. That's the image that Bryan Kelly portrays. I don't think that's who Bryan Kelly is. And that's what people don't understand. Like, and this isn't coming from my opinion, like I'm an outsider, like I run some fan blog. And I'm talking to, for the last decade, players, team captains, NFL draft picks. That's not what the program has been. Flat out comment from dozen Notre Dame players, starters, captain, NFL players. Bryan Kelly would show up in December or January when we got back from winter break, and then we would not see him again until spring ball. And then he would leave then, and we would not see him again until late in the summer when camp's about to start. He was not the driver behind the success that Notre Dame had, because you can't drive it if you're not there. Yeah, and that's my issue with Bryan Kelly. So he's a politician at heart, and I don't say that necessarily as a disrespect. It's a true fact. I mean, he's admitted that's what he got into. His dad was involved in that. I've met his parents. They're good people. I like them. This isn't an insult. It's just who he is. He's really good at creating an image that isn't exactly who he is. He's very good at saying, well, when this didn't go right, it's Notre Dame's fault. And this is why I wrote the article I did when I thought he took shots at Notre Dame several months ago. The first time LSU fans lost their minds over something that I said, it's because I knew what was happening behind the scenes. And so when he would say, oh, well, Sam Mustipher couldn't snap the ball against NC State. Why were you throwing the ball 30 plus times in literally a hurricane? Like, that's not Sam Mustipher's fault. That's your fault. Hey, Chris Brown's got to do a better job of holding on to the ball. Why did you run a jet sweep in the 5-yard line to a kid who's never done that? Tommy Reese shouldn't throw an interception. Why are you throwing a deep ball?
I hear all you're saying, but Brian, I'm just going to tell you,
I've seen the last 12 years. So if you're going to say he's structured and all that, his program has not been structured.
From the coaching decisions I've witnessed in 20 years, these really sound like first world problems. I'm going to be very honest.
Those problems are the difference between you being a good team and a championship team. That's the point. Right. So, like, for example, hires, right? Coaching hires. Go back and study that 2015 Notre Dame team. Like, think about this. Notre Dame went on the road to Clemson. After Clemson goes up 7-0, they shank a punt. Clemson recovers the 25-yard line, turns it into an interception. Notre Dame fumbles a ball inside their own 20. Clemson gets it and scores. They fumble the ensuing kickoff. Again, this is against the 2015 Clemson team. Then they have later a screen pass a crossing route that the guy catches, runs inside the 10, fumbles the ball, gives Clemson the ball. Despite that, Notre Dame has the ball with a 2-point conversion attempt away from tying that football game. That's a fact. Notre Dame had multiple stupid turnovers against a Stanford team that finished that year in the top 5, yet still scored with 30 seconds left to take a lead. That was a loaded Notre Dame team. And the problem is they wasted that talent on that team. Why? Because he refused to make the necessary changes to the program that he needed to make because he wasn't around. Now, maybe that changes at LSU. And if it does, then I think he'll be successful because, again, I'm going back to the guy. If he's the guy he was when he came to Notre Dame, sure. But you can shake your head and doubt it. But I've been around this program for 12 years. The guy you think you're getting is not the guy you got.
I get it, man. I get it. I understand what you're saying, and I hear you talk about those talented teams that were wasted. I'm just gonna throw out, like, man, no stranger to that. I promise you, man. I mean, you remember two bowl games.
We share a similar frustration. That's what I think LSU fans aren't getting.
Two bowl games against Bryan Kelly, where I thought both those teams, LSU had more talent. Remember the Leonard Fournette team?
Oh, sure.
You remember how good he was?
Remember how good Jalen Smith was?
You know, well, dude, trust me, bro, there was so much talent on that LSU team that was the predecessor to Les Miles losing his job because there was so much talent on those teams and they couldn't break through because coaches who knew what they were doing, like a Bryan Kelly and probably 10, 15 other guys in the country will just mop the floor with you because they know how to run a modern offense and they know how to actually do that. It's just the level.
Okay, let me ask this question. Who had the better quarterback in that game? Let me ask you, who had the better quarterback in that game?
Well, LSU rolled out, let's see.
Anthony
2017 would have been Danny Etling.
No, 2014 is the first game. You're talking about the Leonard Fournette team,
definitely Notre Dame. I don't even care who Notre Dame rolled out. It was Anthony Jennings.
Right.
Who was like completing 42% of his passes.
LSU clearly had the better running back, right? I mean, no discussion there.
No doubt.
Notre Dame had better receivers. You didn't have anybody as good as Will Fuller on that team. Sorry. You didn't.
I don't know. We'll see.
You didn't. I mean, Trevin Durrell is not.
I'm trying to think back 2014.
That was Trevin Durrell. You had Malachi Dupree was a freshman on the team. John Darce was a freshman on the team. Trey Quinn was a freshman on the team. Notre Dame had Will Fuller, who was a 70-catch, 1,000-yard guy that year.
Okay, so you had a receiver, but I promise you, Will Fuller, nothing compared to what Leonard Fournette brought to the table, especially in that game, by the way. Well, Leonard Fournette was pretty unstoppable.
He was, and they still lost because they had one dude. If Notre Dame had a third-round draft pick and C.J. Prosise, very dynamic guy, had a jet sweep that game, you're going to tell me the guy that had 76 catches and 15 touchdowns didn't bring the same thing to the table that Leonard Fournette did? Come on, man. Come on now.
But, man, we could break down that roster all we want. I'm just
do it. My point is, in order for you to truly understand where I'm coming from, you have to have an understanding of what they had, right? So when I go look at the 2015 team, and I've done this data. So the 2015 Notre Dame and Clemson teams, I'll give you 2 bits of data. I know we got to wrap this up, right? Because we're not going to change each other's minds. I'm just trying to challenge you to just maybe think that there's more to what I'm saying than just sour grapes or hurt feelings. And that's all I'm asking people to do. I'm not trying to change anybody's mind. I'm not gonna. The 2015 Clemson Notre Dame teams. Clemson beats Notre Dame. That sent those two teams on 2 different directions. Do you agree? They were both undefeated coming into that game. Clemson went on to play for a championship that year. Notre Dame had a higher ranked recruiting class in 4 of the 5 years leading up to that point in time. If you look at those 2 rosters and you look at who played on those teams, so I don't care about like some freshman that eventually became a high pick but didn't actually play. I'm talking about guys that played in that game. Notre Dame had more players picked in the first 3 rounds than that Clemson team. Say, well, Clemson had a top first-round draft quarterback. Notre Dame has a second-round pick quarterback.
I'm going to tell you this. In that LSU game, okay, we're talking about guys like Lael Collins.
I'm talking about
that's a freak,
for what,
man.
The 14 team?
Yeah, the 2014 team, man.
And Notre Dame's 2014 team
Kendall
had
Beckwith, freaking nature.
Do you know who Notre Dame's tackles were in that game? Ronnie Stanley, Mike McGlinchey, 2 top 10 NFL draft picks.
Okay, but LSU had Lael Collins there, who was
one guy
well on his way to being right up there before some issues.
They had Jamal Adams. Notre Dame had 2.
Jamal Adams was there, man. I mean,
yeah, he's a great player. Notre
Jalen
Dame had
Mills
Jalen
played
Smith.
many years in the NFL.
I never
mean,
said LSU didn't have talent. What I think is happening here is I don't think this. I don't mean please
Tre'Davious
don't
White, man.
please don't
you
take
think
this as an
Kendall
insult.
Fuller's better than Tre'Davious White? He's one of the best cornerbacks in the NFL right
I
now.
don't care about the NFL. He was a better player than Tre'Davious White in 2014. Yes.
Oh, come on, dude.
Yes.
Tre'Davious
What did
White
Tim
was a
Tebow do in
beast
the NFL? Does
2018.
that mean he wasn't a great college player?
Man, I don't know, man.
Because
Quan Alexander
you're
was on that team.
because you're an LSU fan, and that's not an insult. Please don't take it that way, because I know it can come
But
across that way.
we're also talking about a perennial all-pro
But what I
player.
was
Like, that's
referring
not
to, I was
necessarily like
talking
me making him
who?
all-pro. I mean,
What's that?
Jalen Collins, who was highly drafted in that game. I mean, there was a ton of talented players on that LSU team. and
I
they
never
lost
said
5
they
games that year.
didn't have talent. I said Notre Dame athletically on that team could flat out play with LSU, and
No.
had, in my opinion, that
Well,
was the same
Brian,
team that.
you know,
Well, let me make this.
like I said,
Here's what I'm
when
going to
we're
ask you to
getting
do.
this granular,
I was comparing them to Clemson, right? The team that went and played for the title that year, took Alabama to the wire. That's who I was comparing them to.
well, look,
But you want to say
Brian,
recruiting classes and NFL draft? I just threw it
I
out there. Now you just want to
appreciate
dismiss
how
it, not even acknowledge it.
in-depth we've gotten tonight. I feel like we've had it out and we put everything on the line. And, you know, you're welcome to tweet me anytime and go more in
I
depth.
don't do the
on
Twitter
this.
thing. I'm sorry,
We're going to
I'm
call
not,
it a night here, about 90 minutes in here. I appreciate you coming on, man.
Sure.
I usually give people a chance to, plug themselves, but I don't know if you want to pick out the hate follows tonight.
I don't care about that, man. I don't care about
All
that
right.
stuff.
Tell where's your Twitter at?
No, I mean, look, you can find me at Coach D178 or IrishBreakdown.com. But all I would challenge you to do is, if you're going to sit there and say that Notre Dame didn't have talent, you should at least have a better grasp of who Notre Dame had. That's all I'm saying. So, they had Lowell Collins. Well, did you know?
I'll tell you who they had.
Right.
From 2009 onward, they had 60 players drafted, and LSU
Sure.
had 93.
Okay, great. 15 of them came from one team.
Advantage. It's
Right.
not that hard.
But we're talking about you keep telling these
you,
big picture things, and I'm saying the two teams that played
more talent is what I'm telling you. They
who had when Notre Dame and LSU played in 2017. Who was the best player in the field that day?
You know, man, look, we could cherry pick all we want. We've had
it's not cherry picking. You keep saying LSU had better players than Notre Dame,
yes,
and I'm saying when they played each other, they
had
did
about
not.
50% more players drafted in the last 12 years.
Okay, but what does that have to do about those two specific games?
Because it's a cherry picked example, man.
How's it cherry picked? It's when they got on the field together.
One example, and I just went through all the talented players for LSU.
Two examples. I never.
But
here's the difference.
Name each team
I have never said
years,
LSU
man.
didn't have talent. The issue here is you keep thinking Notre Dame doesn't have talent.
The mass numbers are there. We can look at one game and say all you want. I don't even agree on the one game, but it is what it is, man. Hey, look,
I know more about LSU's roster.
I do appreciate you coming on. I'm about to watch some Saints football with the other, 300-400 people who are here tonight. I appreciate you coming on, man. Later. All right, y'all. Thank y'all for watching. Y'all don't forget to hit that bell, hit that subscribe. Appreciate you for watching Tiger Bay. Remember, LSU Football Fix on every Tuesday night at 8 p.m. Mike Scarborough, Buddy Sonji will be on every Wednesday at 8 p.m. And of course, we'll be doing our post-game shows all season long. For those of y'all complaining about, ending it early here, let's just keep in mind, I took them 94 minutes here, and we went through everything we had to. We're getting into points of, well, who had more players drafted on this one particular team? All right, dog. All right, bro. You know what? We had 93 players drafted since 2009. I mean, it's one of the highest ever. I gave my monologue. He gave his. I appreciate all my Notre Dame folks for coming up in here. Y'all have a great night.